You remember the bike? Candy apple red, with the handlebars that reached up toward you like a chopper, a long banana seat, and a fat rear tire built for laying a black stripe of rubber down the sidewalk. A Schwinn Stingray. You didn't just want it. You waited for it, saved for it, or your father did. And it came from a real Schwinn shop, not off a rack at the discount store. And on a Saturday morning, out in the driveway before your parents were even awake, with the whole day open and the whole neighborhood yours, that bicycle was the closest thing to freedom a 10-year-old had ever held. For most of the 20th century, that's what one name meant to an American kid. Schwinn, the best bike on the block, built so heavy and so solid, it outlasted your childhood and got handed down to your little brother and his after him. And then, somehow, the thing itself was gone, not the name. The name is still out there, but the Schwinn that meant all of that, the one in the driveway, disappeared, and almost nobody noticed it go. This is the story of how the most American bicycle ever made came to rule the country and then quietly lost everything. And the reason why is not the one you'd guess. It began with a German immigrant who couldn't get anyone back home to listen to him. Ignaz Schwinn came to America in 1891, and in 1895 in Chicago, he founded the company that would carry his name. His timing was perfect. America was in the middle of falling in love with the bicycle. And within 20 years, Schwinn was the largest bicycle maker in the world, holding more than a quarter of the entire American market. Schwinn survived. Then came everything that should have killed it. The automobile arrived, and most bicycle companies simply died. Schwinn survived. The Depression came. Schwinn survived that too. 2 world wars came, and the company turned its Chicago factories over to the war effort and came out the other side still standing. Whatever the century threw at it, Schwinn kept building bikes. It looked unkillable. And then, in the years after the Second World War, Schwinn made the single decision that defined everything it would become. Here's what you have to understand about it. Most companies, when they want to sell more, sell cheaper. They slap their name on a budget version and let the discount stores move the volume. In the 1950s, Schwinn did the exact opposite. They decided they would no longer build bicycles for department stores to sell under somebody else's name. From that point on, a Schwinn would be a Schwinn, sold only through authorized Schwinn dealers, in clean showrooms, by people who actually knew the product and could fix it. They bet the entire company on being the quality name, the one you couldn't get just anywhere. It was a proud, stubborn bet. And it worked. By the end of the decade, 1 out of every 4 bicycles sold in America was a Schwinn. Remember that decision to pull the name out of the discount stores on purpose. It's going to come back at the very end of this story, and it's going to break your heart a little. Now picture what came out of that decision, because you've seen it. They called them the tank cruisers, and the king of them was the Black Phantom. Chrome fenders that threw back the sun, white wall tires, a headlight built right into the frame, a spring fork up front to soften the bumps. It was heavy, genuinely heavy, the kind of heavy a grown man noticed lifting it up onto a porch. But that weight wasn't a flaw. That weight was the whole point. It was the weight of a thing built to be ridden hard by a careless 10-year-old for a decade straight and not break. Get a cheaper bike, and you'd be replacing bent rims and snapped chains by the next summer. Get the Phantom, and you got a machine that could take everything a boy could throw at it and keep rolling. The Black Phantom was the most wanted bicycle in America in the 1950s. Years later, when filmmakers needed a bike so beloved that having it stolen could carry an entire movie, the bike they reached for was a Schwinn from exactly this era. That's how deep this thing ran. But the bicycle that made Schwinn truly immortal didn't come from a boardroom. It came from listening to children. Out in California in the early 60s, kids had started bolting motorcycle-style handlebars and long seats onto their small bikes, trying to make them look like the choppers the older boys rode. A Schwinn man named Al Fritz heard about it, and instead of dismissing it, he built one. Everybody who rode the strange-looking thing couldn't believe how well it handled. He called it the Stingray. Ape-hanger handlebars, banana seat, a slick rear tire, and the ability to pop a wheelie and lay down rubber like nothing else on the street. In 1963, it hit the market. It didn't sell. It erupted. 42,000 of them were gone by the end of the next year. It became the best-selling bicycle Schwinn ever made, and it lit the fuse on the entire culture that would later become BMX. For the kid in that driveway, the Stingray wasn't transportation. It was a membership card to the only club that mattered. By 1968, Schwinn was building 1 million bicycles in a single year. Children made up 95% of the entire American bicycle market, and Schwinn was the name every one of them wanted. The company sat at the very top of an industry it had ruled for 70 straight years. From the outside, nothing in American business looked more permanent. And that is exactly the moment the ground started to move under their feet, so slowly that they did not feel a thing. Here's what happened, and watch how quiet it is. The same kids who had grown up on those heavy Schwinn cruisers in the 50s became adults in the 70s. And as adults, caught up in a brand new fitness craze and a brand new environmental movement, they wanted to keep riding. But they did not want a tank anymore. They wanted the light, fast, 10-speed road bikes coming over from Europe, the kind with thin frames you could lift with one finger. Suddenly, the demand was not kids' bikes, it was grown-up bikes, and lots of them. And Schwinn, the company that had owned American cycling for 3 generations, could not build the bicycle that people now wanted. It was not that they did not try. The truth is deeper and sadder than that. The Schwinn factory in Chicago had been built to do one thing better than anyone on earth: make heavy, electro-forged steel bicycles, the tanks that made the name famous. And that same factory simply could not produce the delicate, lightweight welding the new frames required. The very thing that had been their greatest strength, building the heaviest, most durable bike on the market, had quietly become the thing that trapped them. They were a company built perfectly, flawlessly, for a world that was ending. So they made the move that sealed their fate, and they made it just to survive. Unable to build the lightweight frames in Chicago, Schwinn started buying them from a small unknown company in Taiwan called Giant. It solved the immediate problem. It also handed a tiny foreign manufacturer the orders, the know-how, and the scale to grow, and grow it did. The company Schwinn leaned on to stay alive, Giant, would go on to become the largest bicycle manufacturer in the entire world. Without quite meaning to, Schwinn had trained its own replacement, and from there, it came apart one quiet step at a time, with no villain anywhere in it. When California kids invented BMX in the 70s, Schwinn, the company that had practically created that world with the Stingray, hung back because the sport looked dangerous and did not fit the careful, respectable image they had spent decades building. When the mountain bike showed up in the 80s, Schwinn was late again for the very same reason. Small, hungry upstarts with names like Specialized and Trek and Giant moved fast because they had nothing to protect and everything to win. Schwinn had a century of reputation to protect, and that reputation had become an anchor chained to its leg. The debt piled up. An expensive bet on a new factory in Mississippi never turned a profit, and it was haunted by quality problems. In 1983, Schwinn closed its Chicago factory for good, and 1,800 people who had built bicycles in that city for generations lost their jobs in one stroke. The bikes were made overseas now, and in the fall of 1992, after 97 years, the Schwinn Bicycle Company family-owned and still carrying the name of the immigrant who started it in a Chicago workshop, filed for bankruptcy. The last catalog the family ever put out came that same year. And here's where that decision comes back. The Schwinn name was sold off. It passed from one investment firm to the next and another after that, until it landed where it sits today. And you can still buy a Schwinn right now this afternoon. You'll find them at Walmart, at Target, hanging on the racks at the big discount stores. Affordable, imported, perfectly decent bicycles with the Schwinn name stamped on the side. Which means the whole story ends exactly where it started, except turned completely inside out. In 1950, Schwinn made the proud, stubborn choice to pull its name out of the department stores forever, to be the quality brand you could only get from people who knew it. 70 years later, the department store is the only place its name is left. The bike in that driveway is a collector's item now. A real black Phantom, a true early Stingray, sells for thousands of dollars to grown men quietly trying to buy back a single Saturday morning. The boy who stood over it is somewhere in his 60s or 70s today. And if you sat him down and asked him what happened to Schwinn, he wouldn't tell you about a bankruptcy, or a factory in Taiwan, or a balance sheet. He'd tell you about the weight of the thing under him, the sound of that slick tire on warm pavement, the feeling of the whole neighborhood and the whole long day stretched out in front of him, and a machine that could carry him through every bit of it. That Schwinn is gone, but that morning never quite leaves. So what really happened to Schwinn? It wasn't greed, and it wasn't a crime. It was a company so good at building one thing, and so proud of the way it had always built it, that it couldn't let that way go when the world finally moved on. It was a strength that slowly hardened into a weakness. And there is something almost worth admiring in it, even as it cost them everything, because they never cheapened the bike to save themselves. They just kept building the thing they believed in, right up until the day the world stopped asking for it. So I'll ask you, did you have one? A Stingray, a black Phantom, a varsity you rode to school until the tires went bald? What was yours and what color and where did you ride it? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if this brought a Saturday morning back to you, even for a second, then subscribe and ride along. This is Forgotten American Life Secrets. And every time we go back.